Today on Locked On Phoenix Suns, NBA free agency is underway, and the Suns made one big move to add to their squad in addition to re-signing two key role players from last year with potentially two more on the way. Our takes on all of it after a busy weekend in the Valley and across the league. Let's go.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we're back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Brendon Kleen, your host, and a credentialed media member for the past 7 seasons covering the Suns here in the Valley. Also the host of the Just Basketball Show. Welcome in. Thank you for making Locked On Suns your first listen to kick off your week, to react, to get all your takes for what has been a quiet start, but only just the beginning of Suns free agency. We are free and available everywhere, guys, so if you are finding us for the first time or have not hit that button before, go ahead and do it now, everywhere, including YouTube. Follow, subscribe, get a new episode in your feed every single Monday through Friday. Become an everyday or get locked onto the Phoenix Suns all off season long. Today's episode brought to you by the FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. As the playoffs wind down, the sports aren't quite what we want them to be, but this summer, FanDuel is hooking up everybody, all customers, with the boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right, Brendon. Joining us, as he does every week, is Brendon Dueñas, a writer over at Bright Side of the Sun, and they have been staying on top of all the rumors and reports over on the website, so I am looking forward to talking through all the moves really across the whole West. We'll get to some of that to close out the show, but we have a big Suns move to start off with, Brendon, which is that Mason Plumlee has signed on a minimum contract to probably be the Suns' backup center. I will let you make the case here because it sounded like you were a little more bullish than me. I don't want to put words in your mouth, so get us started with your thoughts on the Plumlee addition and kind of what he could be here.
Yeah, well, first of all, I just want to give a shout out to the Players Association for ruining the offseason. Usually by this time of night, half the league is already signed, or half the free agents have already signed. I think we've had like maybe 10 signings at this point, and Plumlee's one of them, and obviously not the splash that many Suns fans are hoping for, but look, given the circumstances.
Wait, did you think that they were getting Clay? Was that a pun?
I was hoping for, Joel Embiid on the vet minimum, but, he's not a free agent and also not going to sign for that amount. So I feel like that's the expectation from Suns fans.
Right? You do have to say, you got to say goodbye to the LeBron hope, right? I mean,
Yes.
It's not official yet, but are you ready to put that to rest?
RIP to that, yeah.
Okay.
That dream has died. But yeah, overall, getting back to Plumlee, like I feel like that fit is fine. He's definitely an upgrade over Eubanks at this point. That's not saying a lot, but look, he's given the other options that made sense. Like we talked about Drummond, he just went for 2 years, $10 million. Some of the other options, guys that were probably in that Plumlee range, like he's right. He's about the best case scenario you're going to get for a backup big at this point, which is not a ringing endorsement by any means, but I think he's solid enough to where he fits their system in terms of his passing, his playmaking. I think he's really underrated. On that end, it's going to be pretty seamless with what Nurkic does, a lot of the passing, and he's not going to kill the offense like we saw last year. When Eubanks would come in, there's so many times where, and I'm not trying to pile on him, this is the last time I'll even bring him up, but like the offense would just stall.
Thank you for your service. Yeah.
The offense would just stall when it goes through him. And so I think having another quote-unquote connector, another word I'm already sick of with Oso on the team as well, like I just feel like they have a clear vision, and it could be a precursor to moving Nurkic potentially. Like that's just speculation. But to me, looking at the options, looking at who they could sign and how much money they had, it's just I think it's a solid signing. He's a pro. He's a backup big. He'll give you 15 minutes, 20 minutes on some nights if there's foul trouble, and he won't kill you. And I think that's about what you're going to get at this level.
Yeah, totally fair. I mean, I don't disagree with any of that. He's 34, coming off of a couple of years in LA, backing up Ivica Zubac, and before that had some nice seasons in Charlotte. So, look, it's kind of funny. Him and Nurk were on the same team in Portland for a year and a half. So that's a little bit, full circle for those two. It speaks to the similarities in style. I think that's for sure. I think you're absolutely right that, and Iguodaro for sure too. I mean, that I said with him that, to me, that move made it seem more, them drafting him, them trading up to get him in the draft, made it more likely that they would actually keep Nurk, because the similarity style-wise was so obvious there. You had Plumlee, now it's like, all right, I think we can kind of see what they're doing. I hit them hard last year and throughout the whole season for choosing, with the way that they operated in free agency, to have such different guys from starters to backup at that center spot. I think that was a big mistake. So you're right that this is a big help. And so I'll just kind of give it an incomplete for right now, because you said it's not going to kill the offense. I will push back and say it might kill the defense. And so, that's the obvious knock here, right? I mean, positive defensive box plus minus. Again, I always give the caveat that's not an end-all be-all, but it is a general ballpark to give just to evaluate a player who I don't watch every day. However, their defense, the Clippers' defense last season, was 3 points worse per 100 possessions when Plumlee was on the court. Now, that's just as much about the fact that Zubac is a pretty good defender as it is about Plumlee, but still worth looking at. And he's just not an athlete. And on top of that, he's 34. So I think that you're looking at a situation where they're going to just, like you said, be kind of stylistically consistent across all 48 minutes. They're going to play a drop defensively, I think, even more than they did last year. And all these signings, which we'll get to a couple of, if they bring back Okogie, which we'll get to in the next segment, and Dunn being added in and everything else, and some of the names we're hearing, like Chris Dunn still, they're just going to rely on their perimeter defense and kind of energy to make up for it. The reason I say incomplete, Brandon, is some of the guys I think theoretically could have been better. I'm not positive that they're going to be available when it's all said and done for minimum contracts. So I can say, Goga Bitadze or some of the best of the best names, but I also thought Andre Drummond might be available, and then here we are, and his name comes through early on as a guy changing teams for like 3 times what the Suns would have been able to pay him, or double. So that could happen with those other players too, and some of the trade targets, and it won't even be feasible. And then maybe at that point I just look at it and I'm like, yeah, Plumlee was the best they were going to get, and they got him. So, A+, I guess, at that point.
Yeah, exactly. And look, he's not going to be a defensive stopper or some guy that's going to come in and be like that. I feel like he does have that reputation from like the past, just with some of his, his dunking ability, his shot blocking, all that. On an island, he will get cooked. He's going to be in drop coverage. Let's make that very clear. But I do think he has the intangibles where he could serve as that theoretical anchor, kind of like a Nurkic, that he'll communicate, he'll be loud, he'll be in the right places, and serve as that back line with vertical contesting. And he's definitely more athletic than Nurkic, which, again, not saying
Sure.
a lot.
And he's 6'10", right? So it's not like he's a small guy. Yeah.
So I think just that consistency across the board of having bigs that can kind of do the same thing, and you're not going to be adjusting a lot in game. But then on the other side of that, it's like Coach Bud, we've talked about his style, and he, like, obviously, like Brook Lopez is an example that everyone will keep alluding to, but it seems like he's always liked to have that big that can stretch the floor a little bit. So it'll be interesting to see how he utilizes this roster. If these are the 3 bigs they're going into the season with, and that's what they're rolling with, I'm very curious to see how they click and how they use all these guys, because I think there is some limitations that come with your 5 not. Like, none of your 5s are bigs being able to shoot, really, and they still don't have that traditional 4 that's like a quote-unquote like 2004 power forward that's going to come in and just be like that guy that can offer some more size. So I feel like there's some creative stuff they can do with the rookies, I think, too, but overall it's like, how much are you going to rely on those guys to play in meaningful minutes and closing out games? So is Plumlee someone you could rely on to close out a game if you need him to, if Nurkic is in foul trouble or just having a rough night? I don't know. Probably not in most cases, but I do think there are some matchups where he could make sense. So overall, it's I like the incomplete grade, because we do need to see how these other guys sign and how much it's for.
Yeah, look, like if Bitadze signs for a minimum on the Knicks or something, like I'm gonna dock the Suns on that, even if I can see the reasoning. And Look, quietly also, Mark Bartelstein client. I'm going to raise an eyebrow when people from that agency sign with the Suns to wonder how much, if the same level of consideration was put into the fit and the talent as I would like to see. That's how I'll put it. I'm not saying Plumlee's a bad player. I just went 10 minutes without even addressing that side of it, but he is represented by the father of the president of the Suns. That's just a fact. Now, that didn't end up coming to pass with the Kolek thing, so, it's not always going to play out that way, but when a player that's repped that way does come, I'm going to look at it a little differently. Last note, I will just say, this closes the book, in my opinion, on Little being traded for a center. So if you're still thinking there might be a Little trade out there, look elsewhere, because I don't think the Suns are going to have 4 traditional centers on their roster. They already have 3. That's probably just going to be the rotation unless Nurkic is traded. Let's go to another Mark Bartelstein agency repped client, and Royce O'Neal, who re-signed with the Suns as expected, and we'll talk about Bol Bol, who did that as well, not so expected, as well as a couple guys who might be back before long, all coming up next. First, today's show brought to you by the FanDuel Sportsbook. We all love sports, but over the summer, they start to get fewer and further between. They're not quite what we want them to be. Not the pace, not the all the time in your face, unfortunately. But FanDuel lets you keep the sports going whenever you want. All you got to do is open the app and dream up any bets anytime you're in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is giving you that fix by hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, something for everyone every day, all summer long. Get your sports at FanDuel. Head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. I understand people may not want to think about this game right now, but I have been telling you for a while that I have my eyes on the soccer stuff going on, and the U.S. has to beat Uruguay to win on Monday night. I don't think it's going to happen, but you could always just go goal scorer. That's fun. Balogun is plus 220. Darwin Nunez on the other side, plus 200. Maybe you just get a little money to feel better about the loss. I don't know. FanDuel.com/lockedon. Check it all out. FanDuel's official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. All right, Brandon, let's keep it rolling. So you kicked this off with the Plumlee side of things. I'll give you my quick take on O'Neal. We've talked about him and all the way back to the deadline, getting him and why he made sense, and then he played well and why he should start, and then all of it, and then it was just how much, basically. The cat has been out of the bag that the Suns were going to keep him. 4 years, $44 million. That's under the mid-level exception. That's only a bit of a raise over what he was making on his previous contract. I think from that standpoint, it is a massive win for the Suns to just lock in a rotation piece on very good value, given that we know how constrained they are and all the dollars count exponentially when you're talking about the luxury tax and the repeater tax and all the things that Matt Ishbia's pockets are going to need to be dealing with. The only downside, and it's a really tiny one, but it is just worth noting, they don't have as big of a salary now to use in a trade. That there was some positive to overpaying, quote unquote, overpaying Royce O'Neal, which would have just been that they get this, cap people I've already heard with the new CBA and all those things, calling players like this a walking trade exception. Not exactly the most respectful thing to Mr. O'Neal, but you can get why that's out there. It's just a person you can trade that makes a big old swab of money that you can throw around for a lot of different players. So they have a less of a window with that, but that shouldn't matter. They're going to play him and get a lot from him on the court. That's the most important thing, and they didn't have to pay too much to do it.
Yeah, to me, this is a no-brainer. Like the initial trade to acquire him in the first place, and then obviously re-signing him with the bird rights, just having like that's just the value of trading for a guy at the deadline that you're comfortable bringing back long term. Like the Suns enter this offseason, or I think enter this season with more depth than they had last season already, like without even making more moves. Like obviously a lot of it was like theoretical, and we talked ourselves into Bates Diop and Utah and Metu. Like one of these guys are going to hit,
I saw on the free agent list that Yuta Watanabe, I was reminded that he has a player option, and I'm like, not only did he not work, but he was one of the guys they felt so good about that they gave an option to. Just brutal. But yes, you're right. A lot more proven depth for sure.
Exactly. So that's, to me, it was like a no-brainer. Like you're not going to be able to sign someone for that number out in the open market to take that spot. So it's just like whatever Royce's price was. Like obviously he's Royce O'Neal. Like it's not like you're going to break the bank for him, but I think that was a fair market value, and it's a good point to bring up the overall contract for future trades with how limited they are. Maybe front loading even like the first couple of years would have been smart, but
yeah, I'm not sure if they didn't. I don't know if usually that stuff gets like kind of leaked like a ways afterward. You know, we don't know.
And there's only so much you could do with like how you balance that. So there's so many other like little stipulations involved in that. So but overall, like I think it was a no brainer from the start. This fit. Obviously there's wings that can play in the NBA consistently for like 15 plus minutes. There's not too many of those. So if you get your hands on one, you got to do what you can to keep them. So definitely a solid fit, and excited to see what he could do in year 2. And he just does all the dirty work. I think guys like him and Chris Dunn, Ryan Dunn. I'm hoping they get Chris Dunn. Him and Ryan Dunn are going to do a lot of the stuff that the Suns team needs. Hopefully they can add to that with someone like if they bring Okogie back or Chris Dunn, for example, or someone to just continue to fill that role, that junkyard dog mentality. And I think he brings that to the table.
Yeah, I mean, a little concerning that he was a little bit of a no-show in some of those playoff games. Let's just kind of keep it real, right? But I think the hope would be that, you know, like everybody on this roster, the less that he's being relied upon and the less pressure on him. You know, if he's, let's say, not like one of the best options to guard Karl Anthony Towns, you know, an all-NBA or an all-star caliber player like that, then you probably feel better about him than when all of a sudden it's like, hey, if he actually could just start and play 40 minutes a night and, you know, be knocking down threes, guarding everywhere, passing the ball, like, you know, the list was long of him kind of needing to be the savior. Hopefully that's not the case. All right, let's talk about Bol Bol. 17 minutes in, way too long for my favorite move so far of this young offseason for the Suns, including the draft, including everything else. Getting Bol Bol back, I have said multiple times since they hired Bud that I felt from the existing roster that Bol was the single guy that I thought would benefit the most from Budenholzer getting hired and what his track record has been with bigs that are very similar to him, to Bol. He was clearly, there was a possibility he could have somewhat of a market, maybe a little more than the Suns were willing to offer. But he comes back, whatever, if it's the relationship with KD or just trust with the front office. The coaching staff's new, so I don't know if it's that. Kind of got to earn a rotation spot all over again, but I think that he could build even more on what he did last year and really make an impact. And given the lack of flexibility that we talked about with the centers, I honestly think that bodes well for Bol also, where he's not going to play a ton of center, but he might be that other look we're saying that they don't have. It might have to be him, and I just like the creativity kind of maybe that they'll have to use with him because he's a super versatile player. I don't think we even saw enough of it last season.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm definitely still on board with Bol Bol. I think the upside is still there, and we saw some tangible progression in his game last season that just like little things I think that he's picking up on as a pro that I'm excited to see him another year in not the same system, because obviously, like you mentioned, different coaching staff, but same core group. I think just getting a chance to really develop with these guys, and hopefully chemistry does matter. I think they definitely need to make some upgrades around the roster, and they're already working on it. But I think having that familiarity with each other and Bol getting to develop with these guys, like his confidence at points of the season was through the roof, and that's huge. Like it's hard not to when you have the entire fan base screaming your name, 24/7.
And then there were other nights where his confidence was through the floor. It's he's still growing, but I mean, I kind of mean that in a good way because there's still room for improvement. You could get an even better version of him.
Yeah, exactly. So I think his ability to stretch the floor, provide that rim protection. You could throw him some funky lineups with him out there. Like I'm excited to see what Coach Bud does with him. I thought he was underutilized a little bit. Same with Josh Okogie, who I still I want them to bring him back as well. And there's been rumblings they could try to work on something. But yeah, I think Bol I think the upside's there. It's just it's a no-brainer to bring him back, and I'm surprised there wasn't more interest in him, to be honest. And maybe this is just where he wanted to be. I'm not saying he's the next big thing. I'm not pulling a Shaq saying he's Wembanyama or anything, but I think there's a world where he's a very useful rotation piece that could play in the playoffs.
Yeah, we're not sure, right? I mean, maybe there was. I think the Suns were able to give him a little more than the minimum because they had his non-bird rights from the 1-year deal. Like they probably gave him a touch of a raise, but yeah, I mean, him pulling the trigger this quickly tells me that he wanted to be here. And again, we know he has that relationship with Durant, but I think that there is just trust here. You know, the Magic played him for 72 games the previous season, and then they chose to get rid of him. You know, this is a situation where he was able to take another step forward in his career, stay healthy, and have a team that wanted him. That has to go a long way. So, yeah, I'm excited about the versatility options. You know, could he play center in a lineup with like KD and Dunn, and just put size all out there? More, I've always kind of wondered. I know Vogel's not really a zone guy, but why not throw some zone out there with Bol kind of in the middle of it and get creative and everything? So there's more meat on the bone, and then the offense, we all know how interesting that can get. All right, you kind of called the Bol thing last summer. That's a victory lap for you, Brendon, but you got to one-up it now. I mean, is he going to be, fifth starter this year? Are we thinking all-star game? Are we going, traded for 4 first-round picks at the deadline? How are we feeling? What's your bold proclamation now?
Look, I think we're going to get to a point, I don't know when it's going to happen, but at some point next season where we say, how the hell did Bol Bol not sign for more? Like, how are there not multiple teams after this guy? And it's going to look like one of those, everyone knew it, like as they say it in December, January, whenever it is, like everyone at that time is going to act like they knew it, when in reality, when he signed, it wasn't really that big. Like in Suns Twitter and like Suns fans world, it was a huge deal. But I feel like the general NBA fan just kind of shrug their shoulders like, oh, yeah, good for them. Like, move on to the next thing. But I think there's going to come a point this next season where Bol Bol is going to be a commodity, and he might price himself out of Phoenix potentially this season. That's my take. I think he's going to step up and be a solid seventh man that has flashes where he looks like he could be I'm not going to say a star, but a very, very impactful player on both ends.
They'll have his early bird rights after this season, so that's kind of the benefit. That's what we're seeing with Okogie. They technically can sign Okogie for quite a bit of money. We'll get to him in the next segment, but the longer you keep guys, the better it is. Who would have known? And that also helps chemistry. So I think, I understand the general idea, but we'll talk about those guys in a minute. I think keeping Royce, keeping Bol, those were the highest priorities. They did that. Obviously, they kept the starting lineup intact. So, that's 7 guys who basically were, aside from Eubanks, that was their rotation, and all of them are going to be back. And that should kind of just by that continuity, if nothing else, that those players should be better balancing off of one another and everything else. So let's talk about Brandon is on the re-sign Okogie side. I'll tell you whether I am. We'll talk about Damion Lee and give you our Western Conference move, not in Phoenix, that each of us was most intrigued by, all coming up next. All right, we're back. Let's close out the show. You kind of went with the Okogie thing. I'll just respond, Brandon. I think I am not a huge fan of it, mostly from the standpoint of what you said all the way at the beginning when we were talking about Plumlee. They don't have a ton of lineups, as I can currently see it, where they will not already have at least one non-shooter on the court. And so I just think there's only so many of those guys that you can realistically have in your rotation, and therefore that are realistically worth having on your roster. Now, I get the idea. Some of it's going to depend on what kind of point guard do they get. If it's a Chris Dunn, of course, I think almost everybody would agree that Okogie might be a little more expendable. If it's like an offense-first guy who is not very big, like, Monte Morris, for instance, then maybe I could see the value of bringing Okogie back a little more. So it is a little bit incomplete. It is just the first day of free agency. But when I think about Ryan Dunn playing minutes, the 3 centers who aren't shooters, whatever that point guard is probably not going to be a knockdown shooter. Royce is like, when he's wide open, he can shoot it, but not exactly a guy that's demanding these crazy closeouts and spacing the floor super wide. They don't have Eric Gordon now. You just start to run into are you going to put Okogie and Dunn and Nurk out there? Probably not. So is it worth it? I don't know. That's kind of my holdup and hesitancy, but he provides energy. I'm not going to be mad if they bring him back, but they're also kind of getting thin on roster spots. So it is a big decision, even if it feels like, well, he probably won't play much anyway.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. You don't want to have multiple weaknesses or just dark holes on offense in terms of like the ball goes there and the defense is just not even looking your direction. So anytime you have a lineup where you have three centers theoretically that all are not going to be spacing the floor, and then you have a guy like Dunn, who's shooting is a huge question mark at this point. I get the concern with Okogie, but I think to me, bringing him in as like a defensive specialist, especially just given their lack of perimeter defense to like navigate screens and really against those quicker guards that I think Okogie does a great job on. To me, like I think Dunn could help with some of that, but the quicker like shiftier guards, that's where I think Okogie can excel and really come in and be used as a specialist. But then again, you only have so many roster spots, so you have to balance it. I think my prediction is actually what you said earlier is like Morris. I think Morris is going to sign a 1-year deal with the Suns. I think they're going to bring Okogie back just so they have those two options of like, what do we need on the court with the big three right now? Do we need a facilitator? Do we need a floor spacer? Okay, Morris will check in and play with that unit. Do we need someone that can, Steph is on a heater right now. We need this guy. Well, actually, sorry, the Warriors would be down by like 30 by then. Let me try someone else. But you get the idea. I think it's dangerous to play that game too, though, because I think that kind of limits you in a way. But at the same time, if you have those options and counters to any lineup, it's nice to have guys that come in and do like one thing very well. Yeah. But yet it's a fine line. You have to balance it. So
you also don't want to put too much pressure on Dunn either, right? So I get it. Like, yes, he is in theory one of the solutions to that issue, but hey, he's also a guy who can defend bigger players, and he's also a great team defender, and on and on. So I don't think saying, well, they drafted him, Okogie's useless, is exactly, the reality. So I don't hate it, but I think time is kind of running out for me to believe that he's going to be a positive on offense, and there's just only so many minutes for a guy like that at the end of the day. But what about Damion Lee? You think they bring him back?
I'm not a big as long as Grayson Allen's on the team and like just some of their other needs. Like to me, I'm not saying he's redundant by any means, but I would like if it was between Okogie and Lee, I'm going to take Okogie all day. We can not spend a ton of time on him. I just think we'll see if he signs it or not, and we can talk more about it. But I think Lee, to me, I don't want to go on too big of a rant here, but people are highly overvaluing him. I don't mean that as disrespect to the dude, but he is in his 30s. He has never played a real role on a good team in his entire career. The times that he was on the Warriors was when they were tanking or injured or all that stuff. When he was on the Suns, he has been an injury replacement. By the time they got to the playoffs last year, in 2023, I understand people wanted him to play. He played spot minutes. If he was going to be a difference maker, we would have seen it. So people saying like, oh, Eric Gordon can leave. They have their replacement once D. Lee gets healthy or, all this type of stuff. It's like the guy was on a minimum contract. He took a long time to break through in his NBA career. I'm not saying these things to knock him down. I'm sure he's aware of this. I think his biggest role, frankly, is if they're healthy, is in the locker room. I think he's been a really kind of galvanizing guy. Anyone who's ever seen videos or anything around, he's a super nice dude. He has a pre-existing relationship with Durant. He's been around as long as, anyone at this point outside of Book. So those all reasons make sense to me. But this idea that he's going to come in and just be this like missing piece, you guys are, I think, overthinking it a little bit. Yeah, I don't care about nice dudes. I'm sorry. I just want someone that can win. Like we could go find nice teammates as a 15th man. I feel like the Suns do this more than a lot of teams. It's just the fan favorites like the Ish Wainwrights and like that's cool. But I think Lee, great shooter, but to me he's not a difference maker. And I think you have to go out and get someone that can contribute in some sort of way. And that's in a playoff setting. Like those are the swings you have to take.
He's also the exact same size as two of their three best players and maybe three of their four best players, right? Like they already have a bunch of 6'5" dudes who can shoot. They don't really need another one of those. If he's 6'10" and could shoot, I would be a little more into it. But or if he could pass, but he's really just a shooter. He's a fine but not probably playoff caliber defender. That guy's just not. It's not going to really do anything for you, So, all right. Last thing here. Give me your move from around the West specifically. So let's not, we're not doing KCP to the Magic, unless you want to do the Denver side of it, in which case go ahead. But from the West, that caught your attention the most, that you liked, didn't like, going to impact the championship race, wherever you want to go. Just give me one.
Yeah, so it'd be remiss not to mention Suns legend Chris Paul going to the Spurs. I think that obviously probably won't impact the title situation too much, but I think just kind of a shocking move. It kind of felt like it came out of nowhere, and it takes you back to the Chris Paul with the Thunder days, where he's just going to be that vet that comes in and leads like these young dudes teaches them how to start winning, and the Chris Paul leadership memes will come out in a flurry. But it's interesting. I feel like Pop is going to groom him to be the next coach there or something. Like it's two basketball geniuses together, so I feel like anytime Popovich calls you, like you got to take that call. So I feel like it's interesting.
That was mine.
It just kinda
that was
caught
mine.
my eye.
So I'll just chime in on it really quick.
Yeah.
Not going to impact the title race, and it did kind of come out of nowhere. The Spurs are very much like that. They like to kind of just home in on what they want to do and value be damned, and that's fine. Chris Paul is worth it, but kind of like, was there a $10 million bid out there for Chris Paul, or was the 11 kind of random? I don't know. But either way, I think to me, honestly, it just speaks to how much this dude still wants to be out there and loves this stuff. Like he has made no secret of how much he wants to be near his family. This is not near his family. He, probably didn't want to be cut and maybe would like to play with like LeBron or whatever, but he's trying this very new situation around a group that he's never played with. Making a lot of money, yes, sure, but still, like, clearly just wants to help a group again and be important and valued and play a lot of minutes and everything else. And, I mean, we saw Jamal Crawford worked out with Victor Wembanyama. Like, if you're able to be within, like, arm's reach of this dude, your arm's reach, not his, because his arm's reach, you're probably a few rooms away. But if you're able to just be in Vic's vicinity, I think that guys are just going to want to do that. And I don't blame Chris at all, but it's also, if we already were scared of Vic, now he gets to download the Chris Paul basketball brain for a year. So that's just terrifying. But anyway, all right, back to your move.
Yeah, so I wish you told me that was your move from the start, because actually I did have another option, and it was the first thing you were talking about, was like the Denver side of the KCP thing, because I think that's pretty noteworthy just in terms of the landscape in the West. Like I think Denver's getting worse, and they don't have, again, like losing Bruce Brown last summer. They obviously now it's KCP. They have a couple guys, young dudes they think could fill that spot on the cheap, and like they could still make a move for Russell Westbrook or whoever they're linked to. But
what did you think of that, Russ? They felt good about their Aaron Gordon rehabilitation and they want to try it again, I guess.
I guess so. Like I kind of get it, like in terms of maybe just an energy guy off the bench filling in a certain role, but like playing next to Jokic in meaningful playoff minutes and closing out a game, like I just can't see that fit. Like he's a little too chaotic for that type of system, but I don't know. Like it's interesting. I would love to see it. See how it goes.
Mean, it would be more of their like Reggie Jackson replacement than their KCP replacement, right?
Yeah.
I think Brown is just going to have to be the guy, and he's going to have to prove he can knock down 3-point shots, which has not come around for him in his NBA career so far, Christian Brown. But they don't have a better choice there. I mean, if it's Russ over Reggie, you're talking about like 12 minutes or something. It's whatever. But it would be. It's kind of back to the thing we were talking about with Okogie. How many non-shooters can you have on the court at one time? And they already have Gordon, and they have Peyton Watson, and it's like it felt like they had maybe a 2-year window in Denver with this exact group, and they're not going to go into next season. As far as the things look now, I don't think they're going to go into next season as the favorites to come out of the West.
No, West is wide open. There's a lot of teams that are going to be a pain in the butt too, like top to bottom. I think there's so many teams that are going to get either with Memphis, Ja like coming back to full strength with some of the injuries they had, and then you have like San Antonio going to make some progress. We saw the Rockets make a little bit of noise, and then you have like obviously the young teams like OKC and Minnesota, and that's not even to mention like some of the typical teams with like all the old stars like Phoenix, LAC, and the Lakers and Denver. So it's just kind of a weird conference.
The youth movement that came in these playoffs is not going anywhere, I think.
Nope.
Is kind of the moral of the story. Also, you said the Rockets made a little bit of noise. They made a lot of noise on Wednesday. I would call their leaking of random players as quite a bit of noise. At least bothered me quite a bit. But yeah, is there anything you just want to like say that you're interested in having and hope that somebody makes your dreams come true, Brandon? Like a nice car or like a new home or anything? Because it sounds like if you just say it, then it could happen, I guess.
Yeah, I'll take a nice little, so anyone wants to buy me a home, like I'll take it. Why not?
Yeah, up in Camelback or,
Yeah, I don't know, somewhere with a nice view. Yeah, I'm not picky as long as it's, scenic views, nice little summer home. No, I'm kidding.
I think you're as likely to get that as the Rockets are to get Devin Booker. So glad we got that out of the way. Congratulations to Houston for getting Reed Shepherd and nothing else after all that. Enjoy your 39 wins or whatever that is again. And look, I love Alperen Şengün. I will watch your team. I enjoy the Rockets, but that was nonsense. Okay. Yeah, that's it though. I think Najee Marshall to the Mavericks. Honestly, to me, more interesting from the standpoint of that they probably are not going to keep Derrick Jones Jr. and then that becomes like where does he go and all that. So I think Derrick Jones is a little better to me personally, but
yeah. And then obviously Paul George.
We'll see what happens.
Clippers downfall. Here for it.
Yeah, maybe I just downgraded the Clippers as being a real threat a while ago, so they, didn't. You threw them in the teams with old stars group at the bottom, so I think we're on the same page on that one. But yeah, he's gone. East is going to get better. West is going to probably get a little worse, if not stay the same, is how things are looking so far, but we'll see. All right, back tomorrow. More free agent news and moves. I'm sure PG will sign with the Philadelphia 76ers on Monday. So that'll have a whole bunch of domino and ripple effects throughout, and the Suns probably get somebody else, I would think. So hit follow, subscribe, get a new episode in your feed tomorrow, breaking all of that down. Read Brandon in the group over at Bright Side of the Sun, and I'll catch you guys next time.